Welcome to another Swordmaster Publications presentation. My name is Ernie Lawrence, and we're going to be studying Joshua chapter 20 today. It's a very short chapter, but it's very important in terms of the setting up of the promised land. If you'll remember back in Numbers chapter 35, Moses was commanded by God that when they got into the promised land, they were to set up 6 cities where someone who had accidentally killed another person could flee to. And when they got into these cities, they could find refuge there because there would be an avenger of blood that would come after them, a family member that would come to seek their life for having killed their family member. And if they were innocent of murder, essentially, is what this is, they could go to these cities and they could live there until the high priest that was then alive passed away, and then they would be allowed to go back to their homes and live there without fearing retribution from this avenger of blood. And so Joshua chapter 20 is where those 6 cities are set up, and it's a natural progression because at this point in time they've conquered the land, they've divided up the land. We just finished the apportionment in chapter 19, and so now it makes sense to set up these cities where someone could go as soon as possible, because this is going to be a pretty major event. If you accidentally kill somebody and these cities haven't been set up, then you don't have anywhere to go and there's no recourse for you, and the avenger of blood can take your life according to the law of Moses. So that's what this chapter is going to be about. It's a very short chapter, but pay attention to the city names, because these city names are cities that we're going to read about quite a bit as we move through the history, and they should be names that are fairly familiar to you. So verse 1 of Joshua chapter 20, it says, Jehovah also spake unto Joshua, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, Appoint out for you cities of refuge, whereof I spake unto you by the hand of Moses. And again, this is Numbers 35. That the slayer that kills any person unawares and unwittingly may flee there. So this is kind of the definition of murder in reverse. Somebody who kills someone aware of what they're doing, so it wasn't by accident, and willingly or wittingly, that is, they do so with full knowledge. We call this premeditation. And we'll see a little bit later on that there's hatred in their heart, that there is killing this person with cruel intent, because of their hatred for that person. And so this is the definition of what murder is, and we understand here that the command that God gives in Exodus, when we're talking about the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill, here you have God clarifying or giving us further understanding of what he meant when he said don't kill, because that is considered sinful. But what did he mean by that, especially after he just got finished leading the people into the promised land and taking on the armies of these nations, and they all ended up killing them. Like, there was all kinds of killing going on, and now here you have another example of a killing that takes place that God does not consider sinful and provides a safe haven to stay away from an avenger of blood who would be coming to seek vengeance for the family. And so not all killing is sinful, but murder is the intent there. Thou shalt not murder would be a clearer English translation of what was intended in Exodus chapter, I believe it was 20, is where the 10 Commandments are listed. So anyway, so it says, point out these cities that anyone that kills a person unaware and unwittingly may flee there, and they shall be for your refuge from the avenger of blood. That's the family member that would come after the killer and take their life for killing a family member. And when he that does flee into one of these cities shall stand at the entering of the gate of the city, and shall declare his cause on the ears of the elders of that city, they shall take him into the city unto them, and give him a place that he may dwell among them. So the elders, the leaders of the city, would hear the case, and he would make his case before them and say, look, I killed this person, I did not mean to, it was an accident, the avenger of blood is after me, I am seeking refuge here in this city. And these elders Remember, these are specific cities. And so anyone who became an elder or a leader in this city would be aware, hey, I'm in charge of one of these refuge cities, and so they knew that would be part of their responsibility to hear this case that a person might bring in terms of I accidentally killed somebody, or I killed somebody unwittingly. I didn't mean to kill them. And they would be the ones to make the judgment, and then they would be responsible for giving them a place. So you can see that they probably would have allotments for this, where houses were maintained, places were maintained to house this kind of person, because they were responsible for doing so. And this person would dwell among them. He would live there. He would have a place. He would work there. But he couldn't leave the city until the high priest dies. And we'll read about this here in just a second. Verse 5, it says, "And if the avenger of blood pursue after him, then they shall not deliver the slayer up into his hand." That means they wouldn't extradite him, because he smote his neighbor unwittingly and hated him not before time. So that's the premeditation. That's the hatred. That's the intent to kill. If he doesn't have that, it's not murder, and therefore it's not sinful. "And he shall dwell in the city until he stand before the congregation for judgment, and until the death of the high priest that shall be in those days. Then shall the slayer return and come into his own city, and unto his own house, and unto the city from where he fled." So he stands in judgment. They determine, yep, it wasn't a murder. All the witnesses, everything checks out, and so he gets to stay in that town, dwell there, until the death of the high priest that is alive at the time that he begs for asylum or whatever, and then he gets to go home. But it also says, if the avenger of blood pursue after him. So it may be that after a time, the avenger of blood, renounces, okay, I recognize that this guy did not kill on purpose. There was no murder that was committed here. The judgment has been made and passed, and he's been found innocent. And so they don't pursue. And then at that point in time, the condition is no longer being met. The avenger is no longer pursuing them, and so they can go home up until that time. But he at least has to be allowed, or the city has to be prepared to house this person until the death of the high priest, in which case the avenger of blood is no longer allowed to pursue, even if they want to, and the person is allowed to go home. Because remember, the land promises are family based. They go home to the land that was promised to them. They get to live in the land that is given to their family. And so anyway, verse 7, it says, "And they appointed Kadesh in Galilee, in Mount Naphtali, and Shechem in Mount Ephraim, and Kirjath Arba, which is Hebron." So Kadesh, Shechem, and Hebron, those names should be somewhat familiar to you if you've read through the Old Testament a time or two, in the mountain of Judah. So Naphtali, Ephraim, and Judah, we're going to have three of them, and these are on the west side of Jordan in the Promised Land. And then on the other side of Jordan, by Jericho, eastward, they assigned Bezer in the wilderness, upon the plain, out of the tribe of Reuben, Ramoth and Gilead out of the tribe of Gad. And Ramoth Gilead we read about quite a bit. Bezer not as much. And then Golan and Bashan, that's the northern one, in the tribe of Manasseh, or the land of where Manasseh settled, on the east side of the Jordan. And these were the cities appointed for all the children of Israel, and for the stranger that sojourns among them, that's the proselytes, that whosoever kills any person at unawares might flee there, and not die by the hand of the avenger of blood, until he stood before the congregation. So once that is taken care of, once the court case is had, and they assign this guy's innocent or whatever, then the whole thing is done with, and the avenger of blood is kind of done. They don't have any mandate anymore to seek the life of this person, because they've been acquitted in a trial. So an interesting teaching for sure, but for our purposes here in Joshua, since we've already covered that when we covered Numbers 35, Our purposes here are to show the allotment of these 6 cities as was commanded right after they divide up the land among the tribes. And it's perfectly exactly within the keeping. If you go back and read Numbers 35, they do exactly what God has commanded them to do. And you can see right up here in the very first verse, Jehovah is still speaking directly to Joshua and guiding him personally along the lines of doing this. And it's kind of in the following of Moses that you have Moses was the friend of God and was spoken to directly. Joshua is still being spoken to, and during this time you have faithfulness of Israel for the most part. They're not perfect, but they are relatively faithful doing the things that God said to do. But after Joshua, we're going to start to see more and more separation between Israel and God as Israel moves further and further away from faithfulness to God. So anyway, like I said, it's a short chapter. Thanks for joining me for this one. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave the comments, look forward to discussions. And my name is Ernie Lawrence. This has been another Swordmaster publication presentation, and we will see you next time.